Hi, everybody. It's the Plant-Based Business Hour. I'm Elysabeth Alfano. Thank you for being with me today. As you know, the month of January, I am talking about investing all month long. I feel, as you know, we've discussed on this show, that if you want to move the needle, capitalism is the way to do it. If you're waiting for governments, you're going to be waiting a very long time. We can indeed put our dollars in alignment with our values and our voices, and that's when you'll really see change happen. No one has done this like my guest today. I'm going to read his list of accomplishments, but I must say that I'm deeply grateful for all that he does. Jeremy Coller is with me today. I want to bring him on. Jeremy, thank you for being with me. Okay, so let's just, before we get into it, and we will, let's just list all of your accomplishments, shall we? You are the godfather of secondaries and private equity. You are known for having the preeminent food technology portfolio. But really what we're talking about today is that you are the founder and chair of FAIRR, Farm Animal Investment Risk and Return Initiative. This initiative, FAIRR, is really what puts dollars behind change, potentially. I want to talk about this on your day job, if we will. At Coller Capital, you manage $25 billion, but under your network at FAIRR, we're going to talk about how the network functions. You are in charge of, that's probably not the right expression, you'll correct me there, of 47 trillion. Now, folks, if you want to move the needle for people, the planet, and animals, it's $47 trillion that's going to do it. So, Jeremy, let me start with you today. What exactly is FAIRR and why did you start it?
So FAIRR, Farm Animal Investment Risk and Return, thank you for having me, by the way, is an investor network of just over $47 trillion. It's the fastest growing ESG network in the world, which is great. It has giants like Fidelity, HSBC, CalSTRS. So its members are from family offices to the largest pension plans in the world, etc., and sovereign wealth funds. But what FAIRR is doing is bridging the knowledge gap for investors. So it does a lot of research, and then investors decide whether they want to engage or not. And so we do the research on through an ESG lens. I mean, it might be worth explaining the environmental social governance lens briefly. And you know, today, sweeping the world is a lens called environmental, social, and governance. And that means that pension plans are saying, what's the point of having a pension in 2050 if it's too hot to be outside?
Of course.
They're saying if we're going to build a textile factory somewhere, we need to make sure there are fire exits and foundations. Not, I've got to say, through ESG lens, not because we care about the workers necessarily, but because it's good business. Mm-hmm. It is good business to have a strong ESG. It's like when I was an oil analyst, we used to look at the health and safety record of an oil company because it told you something about the quality of the management. And you look through that lens and you can see all sorts of different things. So for instance, we looked through, when we started this organization in 2015, we came up with 28 ESG risks and opportunities. And those risks ranged from 80% of antibiotics in the US are used on factory farms. You know, we know now, we all know people or have heard about people who are not being able to cure sepsis or pneumonia, etc., because the antibiotics aren't working. There's diabetes, there's cancer, etc. This is a long answer, actually. Is that okay?
No, it's a great answer. I just want to kind of bring it home for people. So what Jeremy's saying is that when management doesn't pay attention to the environmental impacts of their business, to the social impact of their business, to the social governance of their business, are they diversified in terms of their employees? Do they have things like foundations and fire exits? So that's something we'd all like to see, obviously. If they're not doing this kind of management structure, they're not running a good business. And so one, as an investor, wants to make sure that they're looking through this ESG lens to make sure that their investments are protected. Now, a lot of people listening today are thinking, well, investments, but I'm also caring about people, the planet, and animals. And this is, for me, the important thing that FAIRR does is it bridges that gap for people. Not always were people caring about people, the planet, and animals. They were caring about investments first and foremost, and I don't begrudge them for this, because I do think it is our use of capital aligned with our voices that does move the needle. So I don't begrudge them for caring, as I do, by the way, about my investments or their investments. I just want them aligned to do the most good possible, and that's money. And that's also change. So as you talk about ESG under this network, I want to talk about what a network is, because people probably aren't used to thinking about it this way. You're not actually managing the 47 trillion, but this network, I'll say maybe even membership, if I have that right.
Yeah, it's a membership.
So those people who are concerned with these issues and realize it's good business to focus on ESG, their cumulative wealth together that they're potentially putting towards this is 47 trillion. Now, this is why I'm deeply grateful for the work that you do. You're a very wealthy man. You're very busy. You don't have to shine the light on ESG. And if you do shine the light on ESG, you don't have to focus on farm animals. And you have. Can you tell us why you've decided to put together this enormous database? We'll talk about just how deep your research is for farm animals.
What you want, my personal motivation?
Yes. You don't have to do this. You're a very wealthy, very busy man. You don't have to do this.
I became a vegetarian at 12, and I was very proud of myself. You know, I was a bystander. You know, I didn't wear leather. I didn't eat animal products, etc. And then about 8 years ago, a friend of mine said, "Can I write your obituary?" And I said, "What the hell are you talking about?" And I said, "Okay, well, I want to live as long as no one else sees it. You can write it." But, and he said. And I said, "I want to live happy to 100. And he had purpose, love, health, and gratitude as I put that as my 4 ingredients. And he wrote the obituary. We actually went skiing together, and he said, "You die tomorrow," which is not great on a ski.
No, a little bit of a bad omen there.
And he said, "Jeremy, you've created an industry, you know, the godfather of private equity secondaries, and you're very rich, and you're a total bore." Yeah, I know. I was like, "Oh, thanks." And
we might disagree.
No, and then he said, "I've written another one. You don't live to 100, you live to 98, and you're amazing." And he put down that I changed pension policy in Africa. I have a passion for pensions, and that I have a business school named after me, which I do now. And that my business becomes great. So I'm sitting there, I'm 98 years old on my deathbed, and I think to myself, honestly, if I could save a few cows from a concentration camp, I'd be authentically much happier, even if everyone laughed at it. And so you know, he wrote down, and I just laughed at what he wrote down. He said, you know, I end factory farming, and I thought, you know, just how does any individual make any change at all? And then I had an epiphany about 6 months later. You know, it soaks in, and basically, I thought, well, I don't really want to picket outside a university, or you know, so what are the cards I've been dealt with in my life? Well, I'm a chief investment officer, and actually, you know, I suddenly realized ESG, which I'd taken for granted, I paid lip service to up till then, ESG can change the world. And so what we did is we did these 28 ESG risks. Like, take the example of antibiotics. 80% of antibiotics in the US are used on factory farms. So the first engagement we did was with 20 restaurant chains like McDonald's and Burger King. You know, we went with $4.7 trillion, 78 investors, and we engaged with them, not as an NGO, but as owners of these businesses. I'll tell you why antibiotics is a risk. There could be regulations. Now, in the US, Jerry Brown, governor of California 5 years ago or so, last year banned the everyday use of antibiotics in California. And you've got all sorts of issues now, and the farming, but they have been enacted. That is an investment risk. There could be a class action against restaurants. That's an investment risk. So we want to mitigate these investment risks. It's about materiality, not morality. And so to mitigate, we engaged with these 20 restaurant chains in April 2016. 1 out of 20 restaurant chains had any sort of antibiotics policy. By the end of 2018, because we own these groups, 20 out of 20 had antibiotics policy. Many of them now have a date when they end the everyday use of antibiotics throughout the whole food supply chain, for their restaurant supply chain. You know, so McDonald's and Burger King and KFC, you know, are all got, at least they look, what gets measured gets managed, obviously. That's just an example, but there's plenty more.
So again, just to bring this home for people, what Jeremy's saying is that by having this network, this group of members, and they have 47 trillion at the moment of money that they're investing in these companies, so they actually own them. This is how you move the needle. You look at the data and you say, well, you are an investment risk to me because you're putting antibiotics into all of your burgers. I won't name one chain in specifically, but all of your burgers. And now the
McDonald's, Burger King, etc. I mean,
do it, Jeremy.
They can be named because they all have policies now.
And this is the point. Jeremy has gotten them to have policies such that antibiotics will no longer be used in this food, which is better for us, of course, as a society across the globe, because there's so much antibiotic resistance, because we have so much antibiotics in our food. It is indeed everywhere, because it is indeed with all factory farmed animals. And let's be realistic, folks, despite the happy cow that you see on some commercial, to feed the world of almost 8 billion people at this point, we're looking at 80, give or take, around 80 billion farm animals a year slaughtered. So it is factory farm meat that's on your table.
For 7.8 billion humans.
Thank you. The numbers man sets me straight. Yes, so first of all, I just want people to understand the scale of what we're talking about. 7.8 humans, almost 7.8 billion humans, almost 80 billion animals. I've seen 77, I've seen 81. So just the scale of that, sit with that, and then know that there's no humane certificate that's going to be able to feed the world with those kind of numbers.
But let's translate that into investment risk, etc.
Please.
You know, so in terms of, I mean, and these are statistics now well known. They weren't 6 years ago when we started, but 91% of Amazonian deforestation is a result of livestock production, because 85% of soya is used for feed. 85% of soya, you know, and in terms of climate, there's so much methane and greenhouse gases produced. You can't get below the Paris 2-degree limit unless you deal with agriculture. In terms of water, your fresh water. I mean, in California, worrying about a shower when besides the almonds, etc. You know, livestock production. You know, we're giving fresh water to 80 billion animals. the waste that's being produced is I mean, there's some amazing statistics on waste, but anyway, we'll leave that for another time.
So what he's saying is, and you can understand this when you understand the numbers, 80 billion animals, less than 8 billion people. So you're looking at 10 times more animals on the planet every year. So you can see the sort of land and water that would require. Since I'm with a numbers man, I'll also spit out some numbers. Life cycle analysis from Beyond Meat using 99% less water, 93% less land, 90% less fewer greenhouse gas emissions, and 40% less energy, according to the FAO. And this continues to be updated. I've seen that livestock produce 14.5% of all the global emissions. And the Wall Street Journal recently did a study that says up and down the supply chain. So you imagine that you transport these animals, they're quite heavy, much heavy. Often it's done live, it's another conversation, but obviously much heavier than grain. If you go up and down the supply chain of how much energy and greenhouse gas emissions are created because of the livestock industry in general, not just from the animals. They say that 36% of all greenhouse gas emissions can be attributed to animals. So the point is, you have to feed the world without destroying it. And if the animals are taking all of the land and all of the water and all of the food, we haven't even talked about food security, but soy has protein. It has fiber, other grains do as well. Do we give that protein and fiber to people? No, we give it to animals, and they give us back, 1/7, if it's a chicken, the calorie conversion of grain to actual meat coming from a chicken. You'd get 1/7, you get about 1/25 from a cow. The point is—
But it is delicious.
Oh, you think so? You've been a vegetarian since you were 12.
Yeah, I know, but that's what people love, their chicken and their burgers and their steaks, etc. don't they?
They do, but I will say, we're just chatting here off the cuff, but when people ask me, oh, is this a fad? This is just a bunch of, people with a sign on a street corner, a vegetarian, who's got a mission. I actually say no. Yes, there are people on the street corner with a sign. I love them, by the way. Thank you for doing that. Then you have this group of flexitarians, people who've heard from their doctor over the years, cut out red meat, come on, pull it back. They're looking at their health. Now, Innova Market Research and the Good Food Institute says that planetary health is as important as personal health. So, the numbers we were talking about for land and water are starting to register with people. That's important too. Those people who are interested in personal and planetary health, together with the folks with signs, that makes a decent group. But that's not what's going to make this permanent. What's permanent is what we're talking about today. It's the business equation that is completely inefficient with the resources that we have on the planet. So we're going from 7.8 billion people on the planet to about 9.8 billion by 2050, according to the UN. But you're not getting more land, and you're not getting more water. And industry knows that. So that's my next question for you is, you at FAIRR, well, we could talk for a long time. You at FAIRR are putting out all this research on things like antibiotics, for example, or land and water use, another example. Are these major protein producers, the ones that you've already mentioned on the show, others being, Tyson and JBS, the major protein producers, you guys that you know of, are they reacting to this data? What has the impact been of your work, please?
Well, first of all, we're looking at all the major meat and animal producers. So we have 32,000 data points.
Gosh.
Looking at issues that haven't been measured. It's the only one that measures in terms of climate, in terms of water, in terms of waste, in terms of antibiotic use. And so I've mentioned the success we've had with antibiotics. It's a journey, it's a journey, but as money is power, as capital is power. Mm-hmm. All 20 restaurant chains have now an antibiotics policy, etc. In terms of alternative proteins, we engaged with supermarket chains on climate, like Kroger, Walmart, and Tesco and Sainsbury, as owners, as the pension. By the way, the owners are not groups like Fidelity. The real owners are you, the citizens. All of us are the owners. Our money is aggregated through Fidelity, etc., or family offices, whatever it is. But it's our money. It's, you know, and our money is now engaging as responsible sustainable profits. But with things like climate, so we engaged with Kroger and Walmart, etc., and Tesco and Sainsbury's, and said to get below the Paris 2 degrees limit, you've got to put more plant protein on the meat aisle. And the reason for doing that, you know, again, it comes down to investment risk. There could be regulations. There could be a carbon meat tax. Mm-hmm. There could be class actions. You know, so there are real investment risks, and the supermarkets are listening. And as we all know, the percentage change of seeing Beyond Meat and Impossible, etc., on the meat aisles is growing, and no longer is the milk, the non-dairy milk, on a separate aisle on the vegan aisle. It's on the, actually that was, you know, it was my big suggestion to Beyond Meat that they only sell it on the meat aisle, and sales went through the roof because people, why would you choose a meat burger when you can have something that tastes exactly the same? So that's been very successful. You've got, and in terms of climate, all 6 fast food chains engaged. We only engaged with 6, like McDonald's and KFC, have committed to a science-based target for climate. Oh, that's the toughest gold standard for emissions reductions. So, you know, there's still a long way to go. I'm confident we're going to win, though. And you just have to look at what's happened in the dairy industry. You know, I mean, plant-based milk was 1% of sales in 2010. Today, it's over 15% of sales. Result, recently in 2020, you know, Borden Dairy and Dean Foods, 2 of the biggest US dairy farms, filed for bankruptcy as demand for their cow's milk plummeted. That's success.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. But that's a question I wanted to ask you. So I am happy to hear that you think we will win. What does winning mean to you? Maybe define that in a numbers sense, if you could.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we can't win fast enough. Yes, right. So you know, there is no celebration. There is no, you know, because you know, we should be ashamed what we're doing to other animals. In the factory farming, this has got nothing, by the way, you know, one of the big myths that we were able to puncture was it has nothing to do with vegetarianism. Oh, you know, this is about investment risk. Yeah. And you can be against having antibiotics in your food supply chain and eat meat. It's not so just that. But, you know, in terms of climate, the sector is moving, you know, obviously not fast enough. 20% of our index firms have now net zero targets, up from 7% just in 2020. So the sector is moving. Methane is a huge issue. Sorry, go on.
No, I'll ask my question when you're, please go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say about methane. You know, methane is a big problem. 82% of the firms in the index, 82%, don't even track their methane emissions, let alone have plans to reduce them. By contrast, Beyond Meat generates 90% fewer greenhouse gas emissions than a beef burger. But I so agree with you about politicians. I was at COP26, and just looking at the numbers again, methane, fossil fuels are 30% of all. They come up with a target to reduce methane by 30%. Okay, they only talked about fossil fuels, but fossil fuels are 30% of all methane. 40% comes from agriculture.
Yeah.
You cannot deal with methane unless you deal with agriculture. But you had politicians, even though they know that you have to deal with agriculture, they've got vested interests they've got terrible vested interests. So yeah, capital is changing the world faster than politicians.
Politicians actually get in the way. And if you want real change, you're going to have to do that with $47 trillion that you're directing, or that you own these companies and you have a part of them and you can direct them towards change. It's very frustrating to go to something like COP26 and see them put forth the numbers in their own right, see them offer on the menu a broccoli salad that has, 0.2 emissions, and then a chicken burger that has, 3.9 emissions. You're doing the numbers right in front of everybody and not acknowledging animal agriculture and the deleterious effects it has on the planet. I think what we're saying here, folks, is you will not address climate change until you address agriculture. It is simple as that. And if you don't address agriculture, you're wasting our time. And we don't have time to waste. It's actually another resource that I talk about on the show. We're talking about land, we're talking about water, healthcare costs. We'll get into that in just a second. It's time. If you're doing a family office with legacy investing, the importance of time in your investment, and you've got kids and grandkids to think about. So the time on the planet is limited if we don't get our act together, and that is bettering our business equation. That business equation affects healthcare costs as well. And as you see these foods adding to colorectal cancer, heart disease, and diabetes, and you look at the numbers and what that means for our bills, our healthcare cost bills, but also for the quality of life, which does have a number attached to it, if you will. You want your life to go as long and as happy as possible. I am curious why we don't have a class action lawsuit. Now, I didn't give this question to you in advance, so we might punt it for another interview. But if you have a thought on that, I'd love to know.
Oh, it's very simple. Sorry. One thing you didn't mention, if you Google calf.law, calf.law. That is a new initiative to accelerate law and policy across the world, so that an interested policymaker in one country who perhaps doesn't have the resources can take the laws from another country and plagiarize them. Google it.
Oh, I will.
There's FAIRR.org. So calf.law is going to and there's a Coller Menon Animal Law Center at Tel Aviv University. There's Cambridge University's got animal law. So these are going to be creating class actions, etc. So,
I'm waiting for it.
On one side you've got creating the investment risk. On the other side, you've got the investors that need to mitigate.
Right, which is why your data at FAIRR, Farm Animal Investment Risk and Return Initiative, is so important. Because .org, yes, and you can see that scrolling down at the bottom of our screen, folks. FAIRR.org.
It's a FAIRR internal rate of return as well,
as only a numbers man would say. Getting this data to people is so critically important, so that the investors know, because up until FAIRR, I'm not really sure that they did know. So it's encouraging to hear that there might be a class action lawsuit. I think of it sort of like tobacco. Ultimately, that did end in lots of lawsuits because of the impact of tobacco and the selling of tobacco to people. So it's interesting to hear. You'd mentioned a lot of law firms. I also, of law schools. I think of Yale that has a department, and I think of Northwestern that has a department for animal law. So I will wait for those. Now, we're talking about guiding that investment to enact change with major meat producers, ultimately meat and dairy producers. That's what we're talking about. How do the plant-based or fermented proteins or cultivated meat, they're so small in comparison, how do they move the needle, or are they really too small yet to have a major impact?
Well, Beyond Meat's and Impossible have broken through. I mean, Beyond Meat's in every, it's moving into every KFC at the moment, and they're in McDonald's. Impossible, it makes veganuary very easy to do for those that want to do it. So it's a journey. I think everyone is starting to cut down on their consumption, because there is, as I said, you can't have a revolution with a carrot. Now,
Yeah.
When you said, is it a fad? In a way, and I'm one of the largest investors in it, I hope it is a fad, because you talk about, for farmers, needing a just transition, which you really need for farmers. They need help and advice to transition from factory farming to plant-based, to growing proteins like peas and soya, etc. There needs to be a just transition for them. But I've just come up with a funny idea, which I don't mean as in any other sense, but I see the food tech as a just transition for meat eaters, in a way. So
I
meat
do as well.
eaters need to, I mean, if you've been a vegetarian, it's great. I love eating Beyond Meat burgers, but really I've moved on to lentils.
Yes, you've progressed. No, I'm in the same boat.
So I do, is it a fad? No, but it's a trend. I do think it's a large, I hope it's a transition, because, anyway, but can we talk about waste for a moment?
Sure, absolutely. Talk
in
about
terms
waste
of investment risk.
Please.
I mean, excrement is,
Yes.
I don't think we fully know how toxic we are, and let's just talk a little bit about how huge it is. So, just one for Smithfield facility in Utah, just one facility, 500,000 pigs,
Oh my God.
generates more fecal matter than all the inhabitants of Manhattan. You take one company, Tyson, just one company, Tyson, produces more excrement than the entire US population. Just one company, Tyson. Now, we're seeing that go into our water supply. We're seeing that go into our land. It's frightening, actually.
I want to underscore what you're saying and help people understand this. That's why in the beginning of this interview, we were talking about this scale. I'm not quite sure people understand. They see a commercial, they see one cow. That's not what it's like. It's 10 times more animals on the planet than humans. All those animals, of course, go to the bathroom. And as I understand it, Jeremy, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, that waste is not treated. So it's not like they're going to the bathroom in a toilet and it's funneled out. And I'm not sure the regulatory process such that this is even allowed, but my understanding, Jeremy, is that waste just flows right into land and water.
So if you Google manure lagoon, when I was growing up, I always thought of, a cow pat,
Yes, yeah. But cow patty, yeah.
A cow pat, but now, because cows are given hormone, because cows eat grass. I know that's amazing that we should even say it, but cows eat grass naturally, and we're giving them grain, which they can't digest properly. We're giving them hormone treatments so they can digest it. I mean, that's why they will have so much methane, etc. And but the shit that's coming out of them is not normal. It's diarrhea all the time.
Oh my God. My God.
It's not normal. And you can imagine if you're given the wrong foods all the time and you need hormone treatment to digest it. Yeah, why would you eat it? Yeah.
Why would you eat it? And I think of, just hearing you say it, there's obviously the animal welfare issues that we're both, concerned about, but what a bad business equation. Like, what a ridiculous business equation to feed them something that they can't eat. They usually just get their protein from grass, like many, because protein is in vegetables. Instead, we're feeding them grains. This grains makes them sick. So then we give them drugs, and then we take in the drugs, and then their conversion of the calories in the grains is a poor conversion. For cows, we say it's 25 to 35. Let's just go with 25 calories in to get 1 calorie out. You're an investor. Is that what you want? You want to give someone $2.50 to get back a dime? You won't be an investor very long. What a bad business equation. Just like, I used to think cultivated meat was the death of animal agriculture. So cultivated meat, folks, we talked about it a lot on this show. You take some cells from an animal, usually from a database, doesn't even have to be from a live animal, and you're growing them in a media with usually sugars and other things to grow this meat outside of the animal. And then you can grow enormous quantities. You're not using land, you're not using water, very much diminished land and water. You don't have the justice issues, if you will. Think about who can afford a filet mignon. But if we're doing it in a lab scenario, then everyone can have filet mignon. So, just lots of benefits here, and very resource smart, if you will. I no longer think that cultivated meat is the death of animal agriculture. I think it is the natural progression. So if you think about the phone, and it used to be attached to the wall, the cell phone isn't the death of talking on the phone. You still talk on the phone, but now you have something called a cell phone. And I see that this is just the natural progression. Technology is taking us to a point where eating meat will actually make business sense, make technological sense. I don't know if you have a thought on that.
In the 21st century, when we've moved, and the 20th century, we've moved from, we've got email, we fly, everything. But how crazy is it that you would get your milk you brew your milk in the breast of a cow, when Perfect Day, which is a food tech company, fermentation company, can brew exactly the same milk in a brewery.
100%. I love their ice cream. I eat it all the time. It's now in my Mariano's in Chicago, so you can just go and get it in the
but it is real.
Section.
It's not oats. It's not soya. It's not almond. It's real milk. It's real milk. It's got casein and all the other things in. It's using bacteria to recombinant, which by fermentation, etc. It's real milk.
Yeah, and it's so efficient to create. The taste is there. There's no sacrifice. So if you have that choice, something that tastes the exact same because it actually is the product, and it's made so much more humanely and efficiently, why would you ever choose anything else? This is why I say it's the natural progression, that we're just making a better product. Who among us would invest in the typewriter? Jeremy, is there any app, any improvement to the typewriter that would make you invest in the typewriter?
Well, I've said that about watches, but people still buy watches.
Well, I think it's this way for animal agriculture. You just, at some point, you'll say, well, that's ridiculous. Why would I ever raise animals in this way? Very crazy. I'll say that at VegTech Invest, everybody knows here, we're really focused, whereas you're focusing on the meat producers and getting them to switch and pay more attention to ESG and be a better investment opportunity by being smarter, and hopefully the result is, better for animals, the people, and the planet. We're really focusing on these businesses that are innovating with plants, and that can even be the media that is supplying the fermented.
History is on our side.
Oh my gosh,
people are investing. We were talking before this interview about your interests, etc. You've launched a very successful ETF for food tech investing. It's the history is on our side.
Yes, the history is on our side. My only concern is, will we change it fast enough? Do you think we'll see change in our lifetime?
Change it fast enough. Oh, yes.
You do.
Yes, in my obituary.
That's right.
I just have to I have to live long enough.
Okay, well then you can't go anywhere because we are dependent upon you and all that you do.
No. I mean, he wrote that to inspire me to do something.
And he did. What a
did.
gift he has given all of us, actually, not just you, but all of us. As we wrap up our interview today, because I know your time is short, and thank you for spending it with us, and thank you for all that you do. I'd like to ask you, since we're talking about you do think there will be change in our lifetime, so we're going to say under 40 years, what are your predictions in the short term, let's say 3 to 5 years?
I have to think about that one.
Okay. I'm going to let you think about that one. And I'm going to ask you a couple other sort of personal off-the-cuff questions. What do you wish you knew 10 years ago that you know now?
Well, I wish I did start. I had the idea 10 years ago. 8 years ago. I'm so ashamed of what we do to other animals. And I think we should be shamed. On the factory farming, nothing to do with vegetarianism, nothing to do, eat less and better meat. But what would I do differently? I wish I'd been even bolder. This is, yeah. I wish I would. So my whole company, in September, I did something which I felt was very courageous, because I've been meaning to do it for 15 years and I've been too scared. But in September, the company refused to buy any. The company we give lunch to all the staff, etc. But we refuse to. It's a vegan. If people want to buy their own meat and dairy, we won't do that. And and I wish I'd done that earlier. It took a long time to pluck up the courage to do that. And if I may say, because there's a lot of family investors watching that do back events, etc. We always do now conditional giving. If we sponsor if we sponsor an event, a gala dinner or something, what we do is do the 80-20 rule. And the 80-20 rule is at least 80% for us to give money for a gala dinner, however little. At least 80% has to be plant-based, and the other 20% has to be free range. It can't, no factory farmed food. So what we call conditional giving, which is, if I may give that a little plug as well.
What we're saying here, folks, is make your dollars count, and you do not need 47 trillion to make your dollars count. You make your dollars count every time you go to the grocery store and you purchase. So you align your values with your dollars and you will see change. And I'm so grateful for all the change that Jeremy has enacted. And I love that 80-20 rule, along with all the work that you do, but that's just icing on the vegan cake, if you will. As we wrap up, I would love to know, is there a phrase that you say to get yourself back in the groove?
If you Google, I'll leave you with this. If you Google time travel to a meaningful life, that's my little story about the obituary. And what I wrote at the end of that was, enjoy the journey, which I keep forgetting to do.
I love that. I love those words. And thank you for leaving us with that. I always say nose to the grindstone, eyes to the sky. We all have work to do. We've talked about it here today. It's not just Jeremy, folks, even though he is guiding that 47 trillion. It is all of us together. We must do that. I want to thank the godfather of secondaries and private equity, the man who has the most preeminent portfolio in food tech. He is the managing partner of over 25 billion at at Coller Capital. But really what we're talking about today is he's the founder and chair of Farm Animal Investment Risk and Return Initiative. That's the FAIRR initiative, FAIRR.org. Everyone go and look at the tremendous amount of data and research that is there, that is meant to guide the major protein makers, basically the meat makers, that's what we're talking about, meat and dairy, to better guidelines for animals, people, the planet through their ESG lens. Very, very meaningful
Can
work.
I just give a chapeau, a hat off to the food companies?
Yes.
They're embracing this.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're investing in a meat company that you're engaging with, and it's listening because it wants sustainable profits. Tyson is now a protein producer, not a meat producer. It's strapline.
It's meaningful change.
It's meaningful change, and we're it's really exciting that a lot of people, a lot of companies, investors, and citizens are all buying into it. Yes,
it's going to take a village. So it starts with Jeremy and the work that he does, but it is up to all of us. So I note that here. Jeremy, thank you for your time today. Thank you for all that you do. Please don't go anywhere. Everybody else watching on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter, I will see you next week.